It's one that shows just how diverse the work was there. That we were working with all different cultures, and that was amazing because I think the overall message that I got was just how universal the gospel is. Unlike, I think, most missions where you're working with a specific culture group and you're playing off of that your whole 2 years, ours was a chance to say, okay, let's teach someone who's native British. Let's teach someone who's native African, someone who's native Chinese or Indian, and come from these different religious backgrounds. And then as we're teaching, we're seeing that each person has something unique that they're benefiting and gaining, but all of them are finding faith in Christ. And you can see that same glow in their eyes when they do. So one example of that was Ralph, or Hao Yuqing. He was from China. He was in one area that was a small university town just north of England. And we met Ralph as we were street contacting. That's how we did most of our missionary work, was street contacting. That was probably 80% of our day, was being out on the streets, talking to people just as fast as we could and as many people as we could. But in Ralph's case, he'd come from a background with no religion at all. He was from Eastern China. And we just began teaching him the gospel from the very basics. And it caught within him. He recognized the Spirit very easily. We did our best to help him to know what the Spirit felt like. And then once he got it, there was no stopping Ralph. It came to the point where his faith was so strong that he was willing to live certain commandments that would normally be very difficult for him to. In Chinese culture, drinking tea is very, very common and socially encouraged. And so every time we'd come to teach Ralph, he would have just prepared a cup of Chinese tea. And he would never drink it until after the lesson was over. But there was one time when we came in and we had planned on teaching the word of wisdom, and we were curious how he was going to take it because we knew that this was an important part of his culture and his life. And we taught him the word of wisdom. We mentioned to him specifically that it included Chinese tea as something he would be able to drink. And I remember he picked up that cup of Chinese tea that he had, and he just looked at it for the longest time. And it felt like the longest 5 or 10 seconds of my life. And then kind of made up his mind, and he said, I don't like tea anyway. I think I'll just have hot water. And so he went to the sink, poured out his tea, got the kettle, filled it with hot water, and I'm guessing that's what he drank after that. Ralph had some other pretty amazing experiences. We came to become very close to a lot of the members of the ward. And there was a time when we went to visit just around the corner from him, the Lavender family. And the Lavender family, the father had a type of motor neuron disease called stiff man's disease. And that made it so that he was not able to move most of his body. Normally we would be able to come in and he would be able to mumble some words and blink his eyes. But on this day when we had brought Ralph there to teach him about fasting, Brother Lavender's condition was more advanced for the day. Before we finished the dinner and the lesson with Ralph, we asked the family if we could go up to see Brother Lavender. And then as we were by his bedside, he wasn't able to speak or even to blink. But we could tell his excitement, as Ralph described, about his upcoming baptism. And we could tell that Ralph was touched by the experience of being able to be there with Brother Lavender and wanting to help him. And we had asked Ralph earlier, as we were giving the lesson, to think of something that he could be fasting for the next time that Fast Sunday rolled around. And he had said that he was going to fast, that he would have the spiritual strength to, even when he went back to China, which was going to be in a couple of months, to be able to stay strong spiritually. And we thought that was fantastic and very mature of him, to recognize that it would be a challenge for him after his baptism to be able to go several months in China without church contact and be able to stay spiritually strong. Well, as we went down and said a closing prayer, Ralph asked if he could be the one to give the closing prayer. And he prayed for Brother Lavender, and it was one of the sweetest and purest prayers I've ever heard. And he told us later that he had chosen that next Fast Sunday not to fast for the spiritual strength when he got back to China, but to fast that Brother Lavender would be healed. And I don't know since then what Brother Lavender's condition is. I know that that night created a bond between Ralph and the family that I know is going to last forever. And it taught me the power of fasting. It taught me the power of the Spirit, that you could take someone who a month earlier did not have any knowledge of God, and have his heart touched so deeply that he was willing to live the commandments not only for his own benefit, but for the strengthening and the benefit of others.